Next news. Breaking news.
Emmanuel Macron checked into Damascus and got explosions near his hotel. Donald Trump stepped off Air Force One in Turkey and got a warm handshake from President Erdogan. That split screen tells you everything. One Western leader wandered into chaos with cameras rolling. The other walked onto a NATO summit tarmac and started rearranging the board in real time. And then Trump dropped the line that blew the doors off the foreign policy cartel. Sometimes you get along with the toughest people, and sometimes the weakest, most pathetic people are the ones you cannot respect. He wasn't just talking about personalities. He was handing a verdict to the entire failed Atlantic establishment. This matters because the smug foreign policy cartel spent years wrecking relationships that serve American power, then billed you for the damage. Joe Biden's team, Brussels bureaucrats, and the think tank class poisoned ties with Turkey, slapped on sanctions, froze Syria's defense cooperation, and acted like moral lectures counted as strategy. Trump landed in Turkey and gutted that script in hours, and he said it flat out: we're going to be taking the sanctions off. It's time to do that. That's not chatter. That is leverage returning to Washington. Then he opened the door on the F-35s and said Turkey has been much more loyal than other countries than we think would be loyal. Read that again. Trump is rewarding loyalty, rearming influence, and forcing NATO to function around American interests instead of European vanity projects. While Trump rebuilds a useful alliance, Mark Rutte stands there practically grinning about producing Abrams tanks, AMRAAMs, ATACMS, small diameter bombs, and Stingers in Europe. The establishment always has money for munitions and lectures, and Trump has a plan for power. See, Macron lands near explosions in Damascus while Trump walks into Turkey, spotting hidden threats early. And that brings me to Parasite, Purge. A 35-year-old man fought blurry vision for months before doctors found a worm moving inside his eye after eating undercooked fish. The World Health Organization tracks parasitic infection prevalence at 1 in 2 affected. The damage can hide as brain fog, chronic fatigue, pain that won't go away, IBS-like symptoms, even severe chronic conditions. Jonathan Otto built a typical cleanse alternative, the full-spectrum parasite elimination protocol with a science-backed parasite formula and red and near-infrared light therapy to support healthy cellular function and natural detoxification processes. You also get free bonuses, including a 10-day intensive parasite detox protocol to prepare your body, support the cleansing process, and maximize your results. Visit purgemyparasitesnow.com. Use code NNN45 to save 45% for a limited time. Trump spots weakness fast. Now here's the detail the establishment cannot hide behind a press release. Trump didn't just praise Erdogan personally, he tied policy to loyalty and drew blood on the old consensus at the same time. While Mark Rutte bragged about Europe cranking out bombs and Macron's Damascus trip got drowned out by blasts, Trump said sanctions come off and F-35s are back on the table for a country Washington spent years freezing out. That's a direct rebuke to the failed class. I'm going to roll the tweets because, well, we're going to light it all up the second that line hit. And speaking of lighting it up, here's the video capturing the explosions near the hotel where French President Emmanuel Macron was staying in Damascus.
الله أكبر عم صور قام صار انفجار ثاني الله أكبر.
So that was a blast where Macron was staying. Now more footage coming in with reports that there were car bombs likely meant to disrupt his visit. More footage, the blast likely to disrupt his landmark visit, which marks the first trip by a major Western leader to Syria since the fall of Assad. Macron is safe after 3 car bombs went off near the hotel he's staying at. So he may be safe, but the message around the trip is chaos and weakness. Meanwhile, NATO boss Mark Rutte up at the podium pushing more weapons production and U.S. defense giants with U.S. defense giants and European partners.
Pleased to see a range of allies working notably with Kongsberg, Raytheon, Boeing and RWM Italia on some of these initiatives. Second, I welcome that the United States and several of its leading defense companies, including Anduril, Boeing, General Dynamics, Land Systems, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, have agreed new industrial cooperation initiatives with major European players in the defense sector, like Diehl, PGZ and Rheinmetall. This will allow us to produce or sustain key American capabilities, such as Abrams tanks, AMRAAMs, ATACMS, the Barracuda 500M, small diameter bombs and Stingers here in Europe.
The war machine marches on. So he talks more bombs and more buildup. Trump is moving in a different direction, heading to Turkey for the NATO summit, saying, making the trip for one reason, Erdogan. He told reporters the Turkish president is a friend and respected leader. And dropped a hint that Washington and Ankara could tighten up defense cooperation while he's in town. The summit kicks off today with Ukraine defense spending and regional flashpoints all fighting for the top slot. Trump boarding the new Air Force One. President Trump wheels up. Next, you'll hear Trump explain why some of the toughest leaders are the ones he respects the most.
What they wanted, that's why they went with the Russians. So here's the President of the United States now walking off a plane he clearly loves. And after a trip that was obviously much more comfortable than he's used to.
And at the bottom, you'll see greeting him Ambassador Tom Barrack of Syria and Iraq. You'll see Matthew Whitaker, the U.S. ambassador to NATO. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he will be there. And then the man putting this all on, which is the president of Turkey, President Erdogan, will be greeting him. And we are about to, there goes President Erdogan greeting the president of the United States.
Yeah, the president has a great relationship with him. And look at the hand clap right there. Also, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is traveling with the president on this trip as well, from what we know.
So it's interesting because this relationship doesn't just go when the president was president.
Right.
He was building Trump hotels, Trump Tower over in Turkey. So they were dealing on a business level first. And that's where a lot of these leaders, he got to know some Middle Eastern leaders too, prior to him becoming a politician because of stuff he's done in business.
From here, they'll go to the presidential compound. So we'll watch as that takes place. But Brian, you're absolutely right. A long relationship. And President Erdogan has said one thing that he wants is to be given access to the same security initiatives as other NATO members. Turkey is a NATO member. His slogan has been from Texas to Ankara, Ankara, of course, being in Turkey. He wants access to those programs, and he'll be given them in a pretty extraordinary way with the re-access to that F-35 program.
What makes some people uneasy about Turkey, a lot of things with Erdogan. But number two is how close he is to Vladimir Putin.
Of course.
So that's when you say, hey, you got his missile defense system. Now you want our jets. Got to make a choice. But the one thing Erdogan has done that the president appreciated, he also has good relations with Iran.
Right.
And he told the Iranian leaders, whoever they are, I'm staying out of this.
Right.
And then they rocketed Turkey a couple of times. So now they said, and they've said some negative things about the Turkish leader at the Ayatollah's funeral, the never-ending funeral he's on. So they said something negative about Turkey. So he kind of risked that alliance for the president.
Let's listen in to this.
He just stopped briefly. It's hard to hear what he said, but our producers will let us know if they're able to make that out. To your point about Russia, tonight a special dinner invitation extended to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So those will be some interesting conversations that are had over dinner. As Zelensky, of course, not a member of NATO, but included in these talks in this big moment for these European powers in the United States.
You know, I got to be honest. it just shows you the chemistry between these two. I'm not used to people touching the president. I mean, he's holding on to the president. The president is not as affectionate that way. So to see him allow that, to see this bond, to see how they greeted each other, that just shows you the separation right there. It is going to be interesting going into these meetings because obviously the president is closer to Erdogan than many of the NATO countries.
You know, Erdogan.
It's a Lions classic. Trump respects strength, not weakness. And now, a step further, Turkey has been more loyal than some so-called allies. President Trump with Erdogan.
With, and some people you don't. Sometimes you get along with the toughest people, like him, and sometimes you don't get along with the weakest, most pathetic people. You just don't get along. Maybe you don't respect them, but from the day we met, we got along. We had.
You know, I am a little concerned about this visit, given the proximity to Turkey, that Turkey is to Iran, one ballistic missile strike away from taking out the President of the United States. But you know, security is high. I've been to the NATO summits. I understand the military operations and the security measures in place. But it's not chemistry. Trump's talking hard policy. Next, he signals a major reset, saying sanctions on Ankara are coming off.
Sell F-35s to Turkey, and what about the legal restrictions?
Well, it's a decision we're going to make. We have a very good relationship. I would think that many people, I can tell you, many people, including the people sitting right here, thinks, why wouldn't we do that? We have a better relationship with Turkey, and Turkey's been in many ways much more loyal than other countries that we think would be loyal. So, yeah, it's something certainly we would consider. It's a great plane. It's the best, currently the best plane by far. And it's certainly something we will consider, yeah.
So after floating F-35s, Trump goes further and says it's time to lift sanctions on a country he calls a friend. Here's the moment he lays it out.
I can tell you, we're going to be taking the sanctions off. Okay? I don't want him to waste his time answering that question because we're working very closely with Marco Rubio, a very famous man, great Secretary of State, and with Scott Bessent, and with Pete and everybody else. We're going to be taking the sanctions off. It's time to do that. Okay? We don't want to sanction friends. It's very simple. There's plenty of people we can sanction, and we are sanctioned. We don't want to sanction friends. And because of the president, we have a very good relationship with the new leader of Syria, and he's done an amazing job. In a year and a half, he's pulled the whole country together. And I have a very great relationship with him. And somebody said, well, he's pretty rough to put him there. I approved him along with the president. We were the two that really wanted him, and he's done a great job. He's done a great job. He's pulled it together. Not an easy job.
So the climax sits in Trump's own sentence, and it landed like a hammer because everybody knew exactly who he meant. Sometimes you get along with the toughest people like him. Sometimes you don't get along with the weakest, most pathetic people. That line shreds the whole fraud. The weak men here are not Erdogan. The weak men are the NATO paper pushers, the sanction addicts, the regime priests who torched leverage, weakened NATO from within, and called that sophistication. Mark Rutte bragging about more bombs while Macron dodges explosions in Damascus only sharpens the point. Trump walked into the volatility, named loyalty, removed deadweight sanctions, and put American power back at the center. Strength recognizes strength. The foreign policy cartel only recognizes invoices. So pick a side. Do you want the old model? Sanctions on friends, lectures for allies, bombs for procurement boards, and another decade of freeloading globalist confusion? Or do you want Donald Trump doing what he just did in Turkey, testing loyalty, rewarding partners, reopening leverage, and forcing the alliance to serve America instead of the other way around? Turkey matters because geography matters. Syria matters because order matters. F-35s matter because hard power matters. Trump knows that. Marco Rubio knows that. J.D. Vance knows that. The people panicking on cable panels and in Brussels memo mills know it too, which is why they will work overtime to sabotage this opening. Don't let them rewrite what you just watched. Trump stepped onto the tarmac and the old script is starting to burn. If you want this White House to keep steamrolling the weak-minded foreign policy class, share this broadcast and drop your take below, and we'll keep this story moving. In order to keep it moving, we got to make sure you're getting the news. That's why we set up this telephone number, raw feed. All you got to do is text those words to 844-840-4963 and join the thousands of patriots who are keeping the truth moving along. And you can keep the truth moving along by going to the merch shelf below this video and supporting the Next News Network.
The system controls information. Information control is power.
They don't want you to see this.
The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now. You know out.